The last-minute assignment. Head chef Nixus's sensory tentacles writhed in distress as they absorbed the contents of the urgent communication. Their iridescent scales shifted from their usual calm blue to an alarming shade of violet. Impossible, they whispered, their voice modulator crackling with stress. Simply impossible. The message was clear. In exactly 6 rotations, the diplomatic vessel, Harmony, would host the first official dinner between the Galactic Confederation and the newly discovered species from Sol 3, known as humans. Under normal circumstances, Nixus would have welcomed the challenge. After all, they hadn't become the youngest head chef in the Confederation's diplomatic fleet by shirking difficult assignments. But these weren't normal circumstances. These were humans. First Assistant Relix, Nixus called out, their voice echoing through the pristine molecular kitchen. Please tell me you've finished analyzing the preliminary data on human digestive processes. Relix, a crystalline being whose faceted body sparkled under the kitchen's ambient lighting, projected a holographic display from their central core. Chief, you're not going to believe this. They actually insert organic matter directly into their bodies. Through an opening. With bones in it. The kitchen staff, representing 12 different species from across the galaxy, collectively shuddered. Vex, the atmosphere specialist, actually condensed into a small cloud of worried vapor. That's not even the worst part, Relix continued, their crystal edges dulling with concern. They require their nutrients in solid form. And they experience pleasure from something called texture. Nixus's tentacles curled tightly around their control console. In their centuries of culinary expertise, they had prepared quantum-sealed energy spheres for the photonic beings of the Carina Nebula, time-reversed entropy cakes for the fourth-dimensional chronivores, and even antimatter aperitifs for the dark matter entities of the galactic core. But solid food? For pleasure. Gather the staff, Nixus ordered, their scales now pulsing with determined purple bands. We have 6 rotations to completely reconceptualize our understanding of nutrition. The next few hours were chaos. The molecular synthesizers had to be completely recalibrated to produce matter that wouldn't dissolve immediately upon contact. The texture specialists, usually concerned with creating perfect energy wavelengths, struggled to understand concepts like crunchy and chewy. Chief, called out Zin, the thermal arrangements coordinator, their gelatinous form quivering with excitement. I've discovered something fascinating. Humans deliberately expose their food to high temperatures. They call it cooking. They what? Nixus glided over to Zin's station, their tentacles extending to interface with the data stream. But that would cause molecular breakdown, wait. Their scales flickered with sudden understanding. They're deliberately inducing controlled molecular breakdown to alter the chemical composition of their nutrients. Precisely. Zin's body rippled with enthusiasm. And here's the truly remarkable part, they consider this breakdown essential for both safety and what they call flavor. As the rotation progressed, more disturbing information came to light. Humans required regular hydration with dihydrogen monoxide. They purposefully added sodium chloride, a literal crystal, to their food. Most shocking of all, they seemed to actively seek out substances that would be considered toxic to most Confederation species. They willingly consume capsaicin, Relix reported, their crystal structure actually cracking slightly with stress. A compound evolutionarily designed to cause pain. Nixus found themselves developing a grudging respect for these strange creatures. Any species that would evolve to derive pleasure from pain-inducing compounds was not to be underestimated. The kitchen staff worked tirelessly, converting their usual molecular gastronomy techniques into something approximating solid cuisine. The protein resequencer was modified to produce what humans called meat. The energy condensers were reprogrammed to create structures that would require mechanical breakdown, chewing, as the humans called it. 5 rotations before the dinner, disaster struck. Chief. Vex reformed from their vapor state in a panic. The human delegation has just sent additional requirements. Some of them don't consume animal-derived proteins. Others have something called allergies, their immune systems actually attack certain molecular combinations. Nixus's scales went completely black for a moment before they regained composure. Relix, recalibrate the synthesizers. Zin, begin thermal simulations for alternative protein structures. Vex, just try to stay in a solid state for now. As they watched their kitchen transform from a precise molecular laboratory into something resembling organized chaos, Nixus realized this dinner would either make history or end their career. Possibly both. A junior staff member floated up, their bioluminescent appendages pulsing nervously. "Chief, I've been studying human cultural databases. Should we be concerned about something they call food fights?" Nixus decided some questions were better left unanswered. They had more immediate problems, like figuring out how to serve a species that voluntarily consumed fermented matter. The countdown to dinner had begun, and with it, perhaps the most important culinary challenge in Confederation history. Nixus could only hope their scales would return to their normal color before the humans arrived. A recipe for disaster. The human delegation arrived exactly on schedule, which was the last predictable thing that happened that evening. Nixus watched through the kitchen's observation field as 6 humans entered the diplomatic dining chamber, their bizarre bipedal locomotion making the entire kitchen staff nervous. "They're so vertical," whispered Vex, who had managed to maintain solid form through sheer anxiety. "How do they balance like that?" "Focus," Nixus commanded, their tentacles dancing over the final preparations. "Ambassador Rashid and her team are the first humans to ever dine in a Confederation vessel. We cannot afford any mistakes." The first course was meant to be simple, protein spheres delicately suspended in a semi-solid matrix, garnished with what Earth databases called herbs. Nixus had spent 3 rotations perfecting the molecular stability to ensure it would maintain its shape until it reached the human's masticating organs. Remember, they instructed the serving drones, place the nutrient manipulation tools on the left side of their eating surface. Apparently, most humans have a dominant appendage. Everything seemed to be going well until Ambassador Rashid lifted her water glass. The entire kitchen staff nearly had a collective nervous breakdown. "They're consuming pure dihydrogen monoxide." Relix's crystalline structure vibrated with shock. "Without any molecular stabilizers." "That's nothing," Zin burbled anxiously. "Look at what they're doing to the protein spheres." The humans were using their primitive metal tools to actually cut the spheres into smaller pieces. The sound of utensils scraping against plates sent shivers through every sensory appendage in the kitchen. But worse was to come. Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the human delegates, raised his hand to catch a server's attention. "Excuse me, but do you have any hot sauce?" The kitchen fell silent. Nixus's scales turned a color usually only seen in deep space anomalies. "They want to add additional capsaicin." "Voluntarily?" "Perhaps they're attempting ritual suicide," suggested Vex hopefully. But no, apparently humans regularly consumed enhanced levels of capsaicin for pleasure. The revelation sent half the kitchen staff into various states of distress. 3 line cooks had to be treated for spontaneous molecular vibration, and 1 prep chef locked themselves in the cold storage unit, refusing to come out. Things only got more tense when the humans began making strange respiratory noises while expressing pleasure, something called laughter. This triggered the kitchen's toxin detection systems 3 times before they managed to recalibrate them. "Status report," Nixus demanded, their scales now cycling through colors so rapidly they were becoming a strobe light. 5 of the 6 humans appear to be consuming the protein spheres without obvious signs of distress, Relix reported, consulting their data crystal. However, Commander Patel keeps making strange gestures with their face muscles at the serving staff. "That's called smiling," supplied Zin helpfully. "It's supposedly non-threatening." "Nothing about these creatures is non-threatening," Nixus clicked grimly, watching as Ambassador Rashid cheerfully popped an entire protein sphere into her mouth without even breaking it into smaller pieces first. The second course proved even more challenging. Nixus had prepared what they thought was a safe option, a deconstructed nutrient suspension with varying thermal gradients. What they hadn't counted on was the humans' bizarre reaction to temperature variations. They're deliberately alternating between consuming the heated and cooled portions, reported a horrified server. They claim it enhances the flavor experience. The situation reached critical mass when Lieutenant Rodriguez discovered the decorative crystalline structures on the table, purely aesthetic formations chosen for their pleasing resonance patterns and absolutely, definitely not meant for consumption. "These rock candy decorations are amazing," he exclaimed, actually placing one in his mouth. "They kind of fizz on your tongue." Nixus's scales turned ultraviolet. That's because they're undergoing a mild decomposition reaction with their saliva," they clicked faintly. "Impossible," buzzed Relix, their crystal structure clouding with disbelief. "Those crystals are harder than Durasteel." But the evidence was right before their compound eyes. Not only had Rodriguez survived, but he was now offering pieces to his companions, who were accepting them with enthusiasm. The kitchen erupted into chaos when Commander Patel noticed the floating garnish spheres, miniature containment fields being used as atmospheric enhancers. "Are these like those fancy molecular gastronomy bubbles we have on Earth?" "No," screamed the entire kitchen staff in unified terror, finally breaking protocol and activating the emergency broadcast system. "Those are definitely not food." As Nixus watched their carefully crafted dinner descend into what humans might call a free-for-all, they noticed something even more alarming. Their special complementary sauce, engineered to be a perfect molecular match for the main course, was having an unexpected effect on the human nervous systems. "This gravy is incredible," Ambassador Rashid declared, liberally pouring it over everything on her plate, including the remaining decorative crystals. "It makes my whole mouth tingle." "That's because it's attempting to establish a mild psychic link," Nixus whispered in horror. A standard feature of Confederation formal dining meant to promote diplomatic harmony. They watched in mounting panic as the humans' pupils began to dilate, their smiles grew wider, and their laughter became more frequent. The psychic enhancement compounds, rather than creating the usual subtle telepathic bond, were apparently acting as some sort of euphoric stimulant on human biology. "Chief," Relix chimed urgently, "the environmental sensors are detecting rapidly increasing levels of serotonin and dopamine from all human delegates. And they're asking for seconds." Nixus realized, with a sinking feeling in all three of their stomachs, that this dinner was quickly becoming the sort of diplomatic incident that would be recorded in Confederation history, though perhaps not in the way anyone had intended. Turning up the heat. The situation in the kitchen had progressed from controlled chaos to something approaching quantum uncertainty. Nixus's scales had settled into a permanent state of distressed mauve as they watched the humans' behavior become increasingly unpredictable under the influence of the psychic enhancement sauce. Ambassador Rashid was now enthusiastically explaining Earth's concept of fusion cuisine to her horrified tablemates. "So you see, we take traditional dishes from different cultures and combine them in new and exciting ways." The Confederation representatives at the table looked like they might faint at the very concept of deliberately mixing distinct cultural nutrient profiles. But it was what happened next that truly changed everything. One of the kitchen's thermal regulators malfunctioned, sending a surge of heat through the molecular synthesizer. The device, already struggling with the demands of producing solid matter, responded by accidentally caramelizing an entire batch of protein compounds. "Catastrophe!" Relix chimed in panic. "The molecules are forming covalent bonds. The entire batch is chemically transforming." Nixus rushed to dispose of the ruined course, but before they could act, Lieutenant Rodriguez caught a whiff of the transformed proteins through the kitchen's ventilation system. "Is something burning?" he asked, his face lighting up. "It smells amazing." The kitchen staff froze in collective horror. In their culture, any form of molecular breakdown was considered a culinary disaster. But the humans were actually showing signs of anticipation, their pupils dilating and salivary glands activating. "Chief," Zin burbled excitedly, their biochemical readings suggest they're responding positively to the caramelization process. Nixis stared at the smoking synthesizer, their scientific curiosity gradually overcoming their professional horror. Are you saying that humans not only tolerate molecular breakdown but actually prefer it under certain conditions? The revelation sparked a paradigm shift in the kitchen. Instead of fighting against thermal degradation, they began experimenting with controlled molecular transformation. The results were revolutionary. "Look at these readings," Relix exclaimed, their crystal structure sparkling with excitement. When proteins are exposed to high heat, they undergo something called the Maillard reaction. It's not a failure of molecular gastronomy, it's a completely different form of culinary science. The kitchen staff, initially skeptical, began to approach human cuisine with new eyes. They discovered that the very chemical processes they had been trained to prevent could create compounds that humans found irresistible. Meanwhile, the psychic enhancement sauce was having an unexpected secondary effect. As the humans' natural mental barriers lowered, they began projecting their emotional responses to food so strongly that even the non-telepathic kitchen staff could sense them. "I'm receiving unprecedented data about their taste preferences," Nixis announced, their tentacles waving in excitement. "These humans don't just eat for sustenance, they have emotional connections to their nutrients." The kitchen was transformed into a laboratory of culinary experimentation. Vex discovered they could use their natural phase-shifting abilities to create what humans called molecular foam. Relix found that their crystalline structure could flash-freeze liquids into something resembling sorbet. But it was Nixis who made the most startling discovery of all. While monitoring the humans' neurological responses, they noticed something extraordinary. The act of sharing food was creating genuine telepathic bonds between the species, far stronger than any artificial enhancement could achieve. It's not just about the chemical compounds, they realized, their scales shifting to a previously unknown shade of enlightenment. Human cuisine is a form of communication. The revelation came just in time, because at that moment, the ship's security systems detected an unauthorized energy signature. Someone else had realized the potential of this dinner, and they weren't all interested in diplomatic success. Through the kitchen's observation field, Nixis spotted a shimmer of movement near the human delegation. Their fourth stomach clenched in alarm as they recognized the telltale sign of a Shadamist infiltrator, members of a faction known for their opposition to expanding Confederation membership. Ambassador Rashid was just raising another spoonful of the now infamous sauce to her lips, unaware that a nearly invisible tendril was reaching toward her plate. Nixis had a split-second decision to make. Their species was known for careful deliberation and multiple layers of protocol. But in that moment, they did something unprecedented, they acted on instinct. Their tentacles flew over the molecular synthesizer's controls, quickly programming a new combination. The device hummed to life, producing a small sphere that glowed with an inner heat. "What are you doing?" Relix vibrated in alarm. "Making history," Nixis replied, their scales blazing with determination. "Or possibly starting an interstellar incident." They loaded the sphere into a serving drone and gave it urgent instructions. As the drone zipped toward the dining room, Nixis could only hope that their understanding of human cuisine wasn't about to trigger a diplomatic crisis. After all, they had just created what Earth databases called a ghost pepper bomb, and they were about to introduce it to interstellar politics. The true test of Confederation-human relations was about to begin, and it would all come down to one species' bizarre appreciation for pain-inducing compounds. Nixis watched through the observation field, their scales shifting through every known color in the spectrum and inventing a few new ones. The next few moments would either make culinary history or start an interstellar war. The main course of action. The ghost pepper bomb arced through the air just as the Shadamist infiltrator's tendril was about to make contact with Ambassador Rashid's plate. The sphere burst precisely over its target, releasing a cloud of capsaicin-enhanced particles that immediately revealed the infiltrator's cloaked form. What happened next would be discussed in Confederation diplomatic circles for decades. The Shadamist, exposed and irritated by the capsaicin, materialized fully, a writhing mass of dark tentacles and shadow stuff. But before anyone could react, Lieutenant Rodriguez, whose face had lit up at the first whiff of ghost pepper, did something unprecedented. He caught some of the falling capsaicin particles on his tongue and grinned. "Now that's what I call spicy." The Shadowmist froze in confusion. According to their intelligence, capsaicin was a defensive compound that caused pain in most species. Yet here was this human, deliberately ingesting it and showing signs of pleasure. The infiltrators' momentary hesitation was all the security team needed. They moved to contain the threat, but found themselves unnecessary. The humans, seemingly oblivious to the danger, had begun an enthusiastic discussion about various earth peppers and their relative Scoville ratings. "You should try my grandmother's vindaloo," Commander Patel was saying, apparently addressing the bewildered Shadowmist. "Makes this ghost pepper taste like candy." The infiltrator, faced with beings who voluntarily consumed pain-inducing substances for pleasure, did the only logical thing: they fled, leaving behind a faint trail of confused pheromones. In the kitchen, Nixus's scales had settled into a previously undocumented color that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Did we just thwart an infiltration attempt with condiments? More importantly, Relix chimed, "The humans are asking for the recipe." The incident had an unexpected effect on the dinner's atmosphere. The shared moment of culinary-induced crisis had broken down formal barriers between species. The Confederation representatives, impressed by humanity's unusual defensive capabilities, though they tried not to think too hard about the implications, began asking questions about Earth cuisine. Ambassador Rashid, still glowing slightly from the psychic enhancement sauce, took the opportunity to propose an unprecedented cultural exchange program, centered entirely around food. Part 5, Just Desserts. The final course of the evening was served in an atmosphere that hummed with more than just the usual molecular stabilization fields. Nixus, emboldened by the night's successes, had prepared something truly revolutionary, a dessert that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously until observed by the diner. "It's like Schrödinger's soufflé," Lieutenant Rodriguez exclaimed delightedly, watching his dessert shift between states of matter. The Confederation representatives, who had begun the evening horrified by human eating habits, were now engaged in animated discussions about the potential applications of Earth's culinary principles to their own molecular gastronomy. "Just think," one minister burbled excitedly, "if we applied the Maillard reaction to quantum proteins." As the evening drew to a close, Ambassador Rashid rose to make an announcement. The psychic enhancement sauce had worn off, but its effects had sparked an idea that would change interstellar relations forever. "Today," she began, "we've discovered that despite our different approaches to nutrition, food has the power to bring species together. Therefore, I propose the establishment of the first intergalactic culinary institute, where chefs from all species can learn from each other." The proposal was met with enthusiasm, particularly from the kitchen staff, who had emerged from their stations to witness the historic moment. Even Vex had maintained solid form in excitement. Nixus, their scales now shimmering with a peaceful iridescence, realized something profound. The dinner hadn't just been about feeding humans, it had been about finding common ground in the most fundamental of activities. Every species, no matter how different, had to consume nutrients. The method might vary, but the communal aspect of sharing sustenance was universal. "Chief," Relix hummed softly, "the humans are requesting to see the kitchen. They want to learn about molecular gastronomy." "And we," Nixus replied, their tentacles waving contentedly, "have much to learn from them." Who would have thought that controlled molecular breakdown could be an art form? The evening ended with an impromptu cooking lesson, as humans and aliens shared their culinary knowledge. Ambassador Rashid taught Nixus about the concept of comfort food, while Nixus demonstrated how to stabilize quantum flavors. Later, as the kitchen staff cleaned up, and treated several cases of excitement-induced molecular destabilization, Nixus recorded their final observations in the ship's log. "Perhaps the truest test of civilization isn't how we process our nutrients, but how we share them. And maybe, just maybe, the path to universal understanding runs through the stomach, however many stomachs a species might have. The diplomatic vessel, Harmony, had lived up to its name, though not in any way its designers had anticipated. As for the infamous psychic enhancement sauce, the recipe was classified as a controlled substance, but rumors say it became a highly sought-after condiment in certain diplomatic circles. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a very confused Shadamist infiltrator was still trying to understand how beings could voluntarily consume capsaicin and live to tell about it. The first intergalactic culinary institute opened 6 months later. Its motto, suggested by Lieutenant Rodriguez and translated into all known languages, read simply, "Peace begins at the table." Nixis was appointed its first head instructor, though they insisted on one condition: no one was allowed to eat the quantum decorations without proper supervision.